Hey, it's Brent from the White Lab Workshop. Today's project was a big one for me to take on. Years ago, I had built a pair of nightstands using dimensional lumber from the home store, with screws in plain sight that needed to be covered with wood filler. I've learned a lot since then, and I wanted to take another crack at them. And this is where I landed. Let's take a look at how I built them. The original nightstands were based on plans from Anna White, and we wanted to keep a similar style. I browsed around for a while and came across a 2-drawer variation that we liked better than the originals. I wanted to make some tweaks to the design, but it gave me something to start with. I took some measurements of our existing nightstands and opened up Sketchup. After playing around with different ideas and variations, I finally arrived on my design. I plan to use mortise and tenon joinery for the 2x2 frame and plywood for the shelves and drawers. With the plan in hand, I bought the lumber and got to work. I bought 2x6s with the intention of ripping them down to 2x2s and 1x2s. This saved a lot of money and made a lot of sawdust. Once I had my stack of 2x2s, I needed to cut them down to length. I took a scrap 2x2 and clamped it to my crosscut sled to help extend my stop block capability. I had left some overhang on the left side of my sled and it really paid off here. Next, I moved on to the mortises. My sister had inherited a benchtop mortising machine from our grandfather, and she borrowed it to me for this project. I had a bunch of mortises to drill, and this machine made quick work of them. With the mortises drilled, it was time to cut the tenons in the 2x2s. First, I used the table saw and crosscut sled to cut the shoulders to a consistent position and depth. Next, I stood them up on end with a custom tenoning jig I built for the table saw. This part was super tedious, but the tenoning jig made me feel much safer than just my rip fence would have. I was very pleased with how well the mortises and tenons fit together. I did a dry fit to make sure all the joints fit together properly. Just like a glove. My sawdust making window in the garage was starting to close, and I had to get all my cutting done. It was spring in Minnesota, and I was going to be losing a big chunk of my garage space to our boat. So I tackled cutting up all the plywood for the shelves and the drawers, finishing the day before the boat came home. It was time for final assembly. I had glued things up before, but nothing close to the level of complexity of these nightstands. I tried to start easy by doing the sides. I let the glue dry before learning that the first part was like a day at the spa compared to how stressful it was gluing up the rest of the frame. I preset every piece in place, so all I had to do was pull it out, apply the glue, then put it back in. With the plan as foolproof as that, it was almost guaranteed I would screw it up somehow. The most stressful part was when I realized how long it was taking me to get each piece slathered in glue and put in place. I was really worried that the glue would start to set before I could get everything where it needed to be. I managed to get everything glued and clamped in place, even somehow keeping it all square. It wasn't until 2 days later that I realized one of the back pieces with a big knot in it managed to find its way to the front instead. No foolproof plan stands a chance with this fool on the job. With the time-sensitive stuff out of the way, I was free to take my time assembling and installing the drawers. I used Brad's drawer technique from Fix This Build That to build the drawer frames. I then put down a piece of 1/4-inch plywood scrap to space each drawer in its spot and installed the drawer slides. Now that the drawers were installed, I could glue up the shelf above the drawers. To keep it as seamless as possible, I had to make sure the shelf fit in very snugly in place. This meant using clamps every which way to pull it all together and keep it there. While the shelves set up, I also glued the edges onto the top shelf. To cover up the top shelf plywood edges, I'd cut 1x2s. I then drilled pocket holes around the underside of the plywood shelf to help reinforce the glue joint with the 1x2s. The last thing to do before assembly was to screw on the drawer faces. I drilled holes for the drawer pulls, then used those holes to screw the faces into place onto the drawer boxes. I used playing card stacks to perfectly position the faces before screwing them down. Man, it felt good to get those bad boys assembled, but I wasn't done yet. My wife had chosen a blend of stains for the finish, so I mixed them together and got to work staining everything. Then a couple of coats of wipe-on poly and this project was done. I'm really happy with how these nightstands turned out. The drawer slides are a huge improvement over the wood-on-wood slides of the previous nightstands, and the overall configuration is much more useful than the previous design I built years ago. Hopefully these bad boys will be around for many years to come. If you like this video, consider hitting that thumbs up button and subscribing to the channel. We've got a lot more projects of various sizes queued up and would love to share them with you. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.